What's up everyone, welcome back to another video. So I'm going to be talking all about the Elite Direto XR Zwift Cog. Now this trainer was actually launched back in 2019, but Elite has since revived this trainer similar to what Wahoo did with their Wahoo Kicker Core and has made it their sort of Zwift Ready trainer. And I'm going to be reviewing this trainer in that perspective, giving a review in a 2025 perspective and sharing how this trainer compares to actual competition now that we are into 2025 and technology has changed quite a bit. Let's dive into the video. Alright, now I've been riding this trainer for the last 7 months or so alongside the Elite Avanti, and I'm now finally ready to share my in-depth review of this trainer. Now this trainer rides pretty much like a top-end smart trainer, since it is actually a top-end smart trainer. It is Elite's former top-end smart trainer, but they sort of made it a lot more budget-friendly, coming in at a price of $699. And I see this as a great transition point to start talking about the specifications of this trainer, and let's dive into those. So this trainer comes in, as I said, $699, which is pretty comparable to something like a Wahoo Kicker Core. The sort of mid-range zone has sort of disappeared, and it's sort of a blur between budget and then there's high end. There isn't much in between, but the Elite Direto is more of like an upper budget trainer for direct drive trainers. Now this trainer is going to have a 5.1 kilogram flywheel or an 11.2 pound flywheel, and that is relatively heavy compared to Elite's other trainers like the Elite Avanti, but it's not going to be quite as heavy as something like a Wahoo Kicker V6. Now this heavier flywheel makes way for a lot higher specs compared to something like the Elite Avanti, and you're going to get things like 2,300 watts of resistance on this trainer, and you're going to get things like 24% maximum simulated gradient. You're going to have a plus or minus 1.5% power accuracy. So across the board, it's got pretty much top-end specs, which is going to make this an amazing trainer. Now, whether it actually lives up to the whole Zwift Ready is going to be a bit of a different conversation. I'm going to be sharing that in the virtual shifting section of this video. Moving on to some more specifications of this video, this trainer comes pre-installed with a Zwift Cog on it. It's going to have that Zwift Cog V2, that little orange thing that you see on the trainer right now. And you're also going to get no Wi-Fi on this trainer. So since it is an older trainer, this is before the days of Wi-Fi, or before the days that Wi-Fi was included on smart trainers. But Wi-Fi will not be present on this trainer as a form of communication. You're going to have Bluetooth and ANT+, similar to most trainers back in 2019. Now, you're also not going to get things like 10 Hz race mode or an odometer. That's all going to be things that are reserved for the more modern trainers like the Elite Avanti or the Elite Justo 2. So far, based on the specifications, this is basically a Wahoo Kicker Core on steroids. Now, another notable thing about this trainer is it does include heart rate and cadence bridging, so that's great for if you're using an Apple TV. You'll be able to sort of bypass that sensor limit. I'm not sure what sensor limit is, but it does limit you from using like heart rate, a trainer, and cadence all at the same time. So if that is of interest to you, then you're going to need to use this something like an Elite trainer for that heart rate bridging. So do keep that in mind if you are in the market for a smart trainer. Now, starting things off with the setup. The setup of this trainer was actually really simple. I actually did an unboxing video of this trainer, and it was so straightforward. It took me I don't remember, it was like 7 minutes or something to get this trainer set up. All I had to do was sort of awkwardly lift it out of the box. It doesn't have a great handle. I just brought it over to the mat, slapped my trainer on it, threw on the adapters, because this trainer does come pre-installed with a Zwift Cog. You don't even need to install a cassette. You could just throw your trainer on and sort of adjust it to make sure it fits. You're gonna use the right adapter between through axle, quick release, just the usual stuff there. So overall, setup of this trainer was very simple, as you expect with a Zwift Ready trainer. Next off, we're gonna move on to build quality. Build quality of this trainer is not the greatest. Now, it is a very sturdy and heavy trainer, I will say that. I definitely had trouble lugging this trainer around, but it isn't quite built as sturdy as something like the Tacx Neo 2T or the Elite Avanti even, because this trainer is pretty much made up entirely of plastic, and when you push in on the plastic, you can see it move quite a bit, which is a little unsettling to me. I prefer the more metallic and the more firm plastic. This is a loose plastic. I'm not really sure how to describe it, but it doesn't feel the best build quality. If I were to drop this trainer, I'd be pretty worried. Now moving on to the ride feel of this trainer. The ride feel of this trainer was pretty great, and it feels very strong compared to most trainers. Since it was a top-end trainer, it does have a pretty heavy flywheel, which is going to help with the ride feel and make it a lot more realistic. So you're going to get that nice road feel on this trainer. Moving on to power accuracy, Power accuracy is sort of where Elite's trainers shine because they have built-in power meters, which is not very common amongst most trainers. And having a built-in power meter is going to mean that your power accuracy is going to be really, really good. And I trusted this trainer with pretty much all my racing and everything like that. It's not going to quite meet the threshold for Elite racing, which is, I believe, plus or minus 1%. This is plus or minus 1.5%. But in the reality, nobody really cares about that extra plus or minus 0.5% that the power is going to be off by. For the average person, this is not going to matter at all, and you're not going to run into any issues with power accuracy for any modern trainer nowadays, actually. Now, moving on to a bit of a more tricky part, and that's virtual shifting. Now, the whole selling point of this trainer is that it's a budget-friendly, relatively budget-friendly trainer that includes a Zwift Ready setup or with virtual shifting. However, that isn't quite the case here. Yeah, it has virtual shifting, but whether it's the virtual shifting that you're imagining, probably not. It gets the job done in a sense, but it has a couple main issues, and I discuss this in pretty much all my videos about Elite trainers, but Elite launched virtual shifting pretty much all their trainers, and that was after Zwift's partnership with Wahoo, and so virtual shifting as a whole is built for Wahoo trainers, and it's really tailored towards their trainers. So when other trainers try to implement it, it's not going to quite work as well, depending on how their trainers design. And the way Elite's trainers design, it ends up having a few main effects. And one of the major ones is that you're going to have a large bias towards the latter gears of 16 to like 24. So as you shift those higher gears, you're going to feel quite a big difference between each shift. Whereas when you shift between like gears 1 to like 10, you're not going to feel hardly any difference. So that's sort of a main issue that I've noticed on this trainer. It was sort of disappointing to me. But you can use the Zwift Cog Elite, which is slightly better. It's still definitely not going to solve the issue because this is something that's really baked into the hardware. A little changing a cog to a 14 to an 18 tooth isn't going to make that big of a difference. This trainer has a pretty low resistance floor or high resistance floor. So if you're doing like 100 watts, you're gonna have to be cranking at like 60 RPMs, which isn't great because if you are like a smaller rider and you need to be putting out lower watts. So as a whole, virtual shifting doesn't work amazing on this trainer. It is pretty amazing that Elite was able to bring it to all their trainers though, so they do deserve credit there. However, if you're looking for something solely for the purpose of virtual shifting, I would look elsewhere. However, if you're just looking for a solid trainer that's really, really strong at a relatively affordable price point with virtual shifting as a sort of a side bonus that you'll probably use once in a while or not looking to like be fully dependent on, I'd recommend this setup with a regular cassette. That would be a great setup for a great trainer. It's gonna ride like a top-end trainer at a relatively affordable price point. So now moving on to whether or not you should buy this trainer, I think it sort of boils down to a couple main points that I've made here. This trainer does have heart rate and cadence bridging, which is crucial if you're riding on Apple TV. So if you're riding on Apple TV, you really want to look towards Elite trainers because they're really the only ones that have that functionality. And it's also going to determine whether do you want virtual shifting or not. Whether you want virtual shifting is going to be sort of a decent selling point of this trainer. If you want virtual shifting and it's a huge thing to you, don't buy this trainer. Buy it like something like a Wahoo Kicker Core or a Tax trainer. Those are going to be a lot better for virtual shifting. But if you're just looking for a solid trainer that has virtual shifting, the Elite Direto will check the box. Now the next thing is modern technology. This trainer sort of lacks things like 10 Hz race mode or Wi-Fi transmission. That's not going to be that big of a deal unless you are someone who has like a relatively slow connection with Bluetooth or just like a generally unreliable connection. You're going to want something like Wi-Fi connection to stabilize things there. But other than that, there aren't really many reasons why you would want to look towards a different trainer or look towards this trainer as a whole. This trainer is a very sturdy trainer and I don't really have any doubts of this trainer. It's built relatively well, not the best, but it is going to get the job done and it does ride really, really well. Now if you want purchasing advice, please leave a comment in the comment section below and I would be sure to get to that. But that just about wraps up this video. As a whole, the Elite Direto is a pretty solid trainer and I don't really have that many hesitations recommending it unless this is solely for the purpose of virtual shifting. With that, thank you all for watching. Please like and subscribe and ride on and see you on the next one.